The year was 1886, and storm clouds were brewing over Africa. The previous year, representatives of the most powerful nations on earth had risen from a meeting with the fate of the continent and the future of its people decided. This conference convened in Berlin at the behest of Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany, to prevent war amongst the leading nations of Europe, who were in a stiff competition for the control of Africa. Known as the Berlin West Africa Conference of 1884 to 85, its main purpose was to decide how Africa would be governed, though no single African was invited or present. Britain and France were leading agitators, and before the conference, each already held several trading colonies along the coast of West Africa. But for these imperial powers to communicate with their West African colonies, they relied on ships traveling across the Atlantic. A vessel conveying messages between London and Lagos typically took 4 weeks. This meant upwards of 2 months were required to receive a response to a dispatch. For colonial officials, this led to difficulties in decision making, especially when events on the ground were changing fast. It was common for a letter sent from Lagos to London to be followed by another dispatch with the latest developments, even before London could fashion a response to the first letter. On the other hand, while Lagos may have made significant progress executing a certain set of instructions, a new set could arrive, upsetting the work already done on the first. Without any form of instant communications, such delays were unavoidable, and in the scramble for territory that followed Berlin, risky to say the least. Any empire that sought to claim and retain new colonies in Africa needed a means to communicate with its officials on the ground instantly. In 1886, following a year of investigations and consultations, the British government entered into a contract with 2 experts for the construction of telegraph lines to its colonies on the coast of West Africa. These experts were the Brazilian Submarine Telegraph Company, a lesser partner in the venture, and the Eastern Telegraph Company, or Eastern, the greater partner. Across the world, Eastern owned more submarine cables than any other telegraph company. In addition to its own cables, Eastern partnered with or owned shares in several other cable companies, and it frequently established subsidiaries to connect new locations to the continuously expanding global telegraph network. To execute its contract with the British government, Eastern set up a new subsidiary called the African Direct Telegraph Company, or ADTC. Signed on the 19th of January 1886, the submarine contract clearly outlined the responsibilities of each party. The companies were supposed to lay the cable from the islands of Cape Verde, commencing at São Vicente and onto Santiago, before proceeding to the African mainland, where landings and stations will be established at Bathurst, today's Banjul and capital of the Gambia, and from there to Sierra Leone, Accra, Lagos, and the settlements of Brass and Bonny on the mouth of River Niger. In addition to laying the cables and constructing the stations, the companies were expected to operate the line and to do so effectively. This meant that, amongst other things, the line was to be capable of transmitting 14 words per minute. 2 cable construction ships, the Britannia and the Scotia were deployed to lay the cables, and by the 1st of July, Bathurst was connected to Santiago, followed by Sierra Leone on the 13th, and then Accra on the 23rd of August. The Lagos and Brass sections were connected on the 11th of September, and finally, the cable was completed with the link to Bonny made on the 18th. Overall, the contract was completed 1 month behind schedule, but the government did not seem to mind. The contract stipulated that the stations would be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily and throughout the night if there was traffic to forward. It also mandated the companies to give priority to all government messages, which were to be transmitted at half the regular rate. On its part, the British government retained the right to nominate a director to the board of the ADTC, and it promised to pay the company an annual subsidy of £19,000 for a period of 20 years, as long as the company maintained cable operations in accordance with the terms and conditions of the contract. Hello friends, I want to thank you for supporting Nationhood Podcast. If you are watching this video and are yet to subscribe to the channel, please go ahead and do so right now. Our content is free, and by subscribing, you always know when there's something new. So go ahead and click the subscribe button now, and then let's get back to the video. The submarine connection transformed British communications in West Africa. It became possible to exchange messages between London and Lagos in hours. This was a tremendous advancement. On the 4 weeks it typically took a ship to ferry mail across the Atlantic. For the British, this connection was also crucial for geopolitical reasons. They were slightly behind the French in West Africa, who had already connected Paris to their coastal colonies in the region, including Saint Louis, Dakar, Grand Bassam, Cotonou, and Libreville. Before the British cable was constructed, they could make use of the French lines, but at the risk of exposing their information, and with the frenzy for African territory at fever pitch, this was a risk the British could ill afford. The newly constructed cable also connected British colonies in West Africa to the rest of the British territories across the world, making it possible to exchange information with the Americas, Asia, and Australia. Later on, provisions were made for cable connections linking the French and British colonies in West Africa to one another. Thus, the submarine cables to West Africa were crucial both for empire building and for diplomacy. The cable was also beneficial to trade and commerce. Merchants and manufacturers from Europe who had established trading posts on the coast and along the Niger could now trade their commodities faster than before, thanks to the boost in communication speeds. Newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic equally benefited. In London, papers like The Times took advantage of the cable to publish the latest news from West Africa, just as journals like the Lagos Observer was able to offer the latest foreign news to its readers. The cable was therefore one of the early steps taken towards making West Africa part of the global village. It is also worth noting that the cable service was not accessible to common people because it was very expensive. Indeed, some British merchants complained about the costs. An article published in April 1888 in the Liverpool Journal of Commerce decried the high rates charged for sending cables to Lagos. Interestingly, the benefits of cable highlighted one drawback in the new system of communications between Europe and West Africa. Because the undersea cables terminated at the coast, communicating with the interior in a fast and efficient manner remained considerably difficult for British officials located in places like Lokoja. Messages received at Lagos still had to travel upriver by boats, and this usually took a couple of days. For locations that could not be reached by river, overland journeys meant messages would take a couple of weeks to arrive. Thus, even with cable, communication with the interior was still delayed. This concern, particularly in the light of territorial advances made by the French, led Britain to start constructing an inland telegraph network by 1897. The inland network connected with the cable station in Lagos, and as it spread through the hinterlands, it became possible to exchange messages between the interior of Nigeria and most parts of the world. By 1909, there were 5,561 miles of inland telegraph lines and 72 inland telegraph stations in Nigeria. The cable connection was therefore the catalyst for the expansion of telecommunications in Nigeria. More generally, the cost of maintenance and repairs was another drawback of cable communications. Underwater cables were notoriously heavy and difficult to access, so whenever faults or breaks occurred on the line, sometimes due to hazards like ship anchors, large fishing equipment, or natural causes, the cost of fixing the problem was usually significant. And because the government as well as private users relied on a properly functioning connection, repairs had to be undertaken quickly, regardless of the cost. Before long, scientists, inventors, and investors started to investigate alternative methods of international telecommunications. This led to the birth of wireless telegraphy, which meant to communicate by telegraph but without wires. In 1913, the African Direct Telegraph Company added wireless operations to its cable business by establishing Nigeria's first wireless station in Lagos. This station was able to communicate with similar stations at Accra in the Gold Coast, Monrovia in Liberia, and Douala in the Cameroons. It could also communicate with ships in the Forcados River, 150 miles away. In the 1920s, wireless will be extended to inland communications, where it will combine with the landline network to create a robust communication system. By the 1930s, wireless will be further extended to aviation and air traffic control. Clearly, the introduction of cable communications to Nigeria had greater implications than were originally envisioned. The telecommunications services offered in Nigeria would also expand beyond the telegraph to include the telephone, moving from the exchange of text to the exchange of sound. In 1949, the African Direct Telegraph Company was merged into an entity called Cable and Wireless, and in 1962, just after independence, the operations of cable and wireless in Nigeria were taken over by the government through a new entity called Nigeria External Telecommunications Limited, NET. Originally focused on international communications, NET merged in 1985 with the Internal Telecommunications arm of the Posts and Telecommunications Department in the Ministry of Communications to create NITEL, a state-owned monopoly responsible for both internal and international telecommunications. Upon privatization of the telecoms industry in 2015, NITEL's assets were transferred to the NATCOM Consortium, which rebranded the enterprise as Nigeria Telecommunications Limited, or NTEL. Faced with stiff competition and financial difficulties, NTEL's initial period of success was followed by a rapid decline that resulted in a takeover by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, AMCON. With Nigeria's telecoms market still dominated by foreign companies, one may question the extent to which the country has established proper control over such a critical public resource. Even so, Nigeria remains a major hub for communications in West Africa. Also, telecoms is central to all aspects of modern life in Nigeria, including private and mass communications, security, trade, finance, health, education, agriculture, and so much more. It is safe to say that even today, the legacies of Nigeria's first submarine cable are alive and well. What do you think about the first submarine cable in Nigeria? Did it do enough to pull the country into the modern world? Or does Nigeria remain behind in the ongoing global digital revolution? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, thank you for watching.